Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. Today on Perspectives, we hear about the program USA in West Africa, Dreams of Alabamians in Africa. And our guest says that it's a full circle play on the title of a significant historical work on Africatown, Dreams of Africa in Alabama. Our guest this morning is a local university professor who has been instrumental in preserving the history of Mobile's Africatown community. He decided to take a small group of students to Africa this past spring. Now, many of the students who made the journey are from Alabama, and most are taking classes in the African American Studies program at South. But some are majoring in other fields, including science and medical studies. And according to our guest, the expectation was for the students to reap multiple benefits while doing field work that helps them understand the complex reality of race in the African diaspora. He says that from his own experience studying abroad, it's a community-altering situation because people typically come home from these experiences, he says, and they engage civically in ways that they hadn't before. Our guest today, Dr. Kern Jackson. He's the director of the African American Studies program at the University of South Alabama. He's also an associate professor of English at South. But it doesn't end there. He's also a folklorist, an ethnographer, African Americanist, curator of community engagement programming, and the co-writer and co-producer of the award-winning documentary Descendant. Dr. Kern Jackson joins us today on Perspectives. Now, after a quick break this morning, we'll hear from Dr. Jackson about the South Alabama students' recent trip abroad to Africa, to the countries of Ghana, Togo, and Benin. Benin, you may know, is where 164 years ago in 1860, the slave ship Clotilda, loaded with captives, left a West African port in the Kingdom of Dahomey to make the infamous return voyage to Mobile. Our guest, Dr. Kern Jackson, when Perspectives continues in just a moment. Welcome back. As mentioned, Dr. Kern Jackson is our very special guest today, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome back to the States. You were away for a little while, and we had hoped to have you before you left, and so we're glad to have you back on this. Let's sort of get into this where we look at how did you decide to offer this to the students? Now, you yourself had personal experiences studying abroad. What were the benefits you saw that would benefit them?
Well, our program actually, we began planning like 3 years ago, mostly because there's so much in terms of logistics involved. And we didn't know how many students were going to be a part of this or necessarily where we were going to go until we did a brief exchange with the University of Cotonou Abomey in Benin. And we had a little grant so we could video our class into their class, and so we had an exchange. And this study abroad is sort of an outgrowth of that, and which turned out to be wonderful because then we had an opportunity to meet these students in person. So that's sort of the backstory on that. And in terms of what these types of experiences do for students is they're game changers, right? One becomes a global citizen when one is exposed and travels and sort of has proximity with other folks from other parts of the world. And one of the things I love about it, it always causes a bump in people's GPA. Okay. Because there's more on the line with respect to what you do with the knowledge that you gain.
So you, of course, experienced this yourself personally during your time. So when you were looking at those 3 countries you selected, you shared about Benin, but tell us how Togo and the third country.
Right. Typically with study abroad programs, we have in-country partners. And the in-country partner for USA Study Abroad in West Africa is called Africa Our Home. It's a smaller outfit, and it's located in Lomé, Togo. So that's where it's based. And that little company and South got together and sort of designed a specific type of study abroad that lets you explore not only West African culture, but particularly locations involved with the slave trade. And so the journey that our students took and the course that we offered allowed them to visit Keta, Ghana, Lomé, Togo, Ouidah, Benin, Abadrafo, Togo. And so it was pretty comprehensive because you're crossing borders, right? And that's always a challenge, but it's also very eye-opening.
And are those borders fairly close?
Yeah, we're talking about 250-mile radius along the west coast.
Now, when you mentioned Benin, and I shared some of your information earlier in the presentation there, we talked about the Kingdom of Dahomey, and then, of course, you've been involved with Africa Town for a few years now.
Yeah.
Connection there.
Yeah, Dr. Sylviane Diop and others have done extensive work connecting Mobile County specifically to Ouidah, Benin, and one of the sort of the crowning achievements of this particular study abroad was actually to take students to that port of Ouidah and sort of think about the research that she and others have done, and also to talk to historians in Benin and sort of get a West African point of view, some of which is in total agreement, right? Some of which we're still having conversations about. And in fact, in Ouidah, my students had the opportunity to speak with students from the University of Cotonou, Abomey, and that was mind-blowing and incredible, not just for myself bearing witness to it, but for those students to actually have that exchange was fabulous.
Give us an idea of what kind of interchange happened there.
The students my students wanted to know about cultural events, things such as, the ghost dance, the sacred forest, spiritual locations held in high esteem in Ouidah, and of course, the Beninian students wanted to know, why did we want to come? How does the diasporic experience connect with what's going on currently? And so Dr. Yamaku from the university and I just sort of introduced them to one another, and then we faded to the background, and then they spent 2 hours talking. And that, from my class point of view, was invaluable.
Now, when you talked, you mentioned briefly there a standpoint of there's agreement and then there's some disagreement about what happened. What's the perspective from the Benin students?
From the perspective of the Benin students, I think that so many folks are trying to get to the States, and that's sort of for economic reasons, right? And so that's sort of a primary. So the notion of historic tourism for the young folks over there is something that is unique and different. To have 18 to 22-year-olds come to West Africa and meet up with other 18 to 22-year-olds, it's sort of, they want to know, well, why are you here, and what are you studying, and why is it important to you?
Right.
Because people don't necessarily think about race in the same way in these West African communities as we do in Gulf Coast of Alabama.
Is that due to how we deal with a more diverse population here, and then the history of how some of that diversity is played out? Yeah,
you completely in point of view, right? And wallowing in the complexities of various point of views. And that's what I mean when I talk about students on both sides becoming global citizens, right? Sort of being in proximity in ways that you just can't through reading a text necessarily. So again, and it was really, really cool and exciting to observe.
And have they moved beyond some of the colonialism that they've had to deal with and separating themselves from that experience?
Right. No, it's incredibly complicated. My students were challenged by the fact of the blueprint that colonialism has left in terms of not only arbitrary borders between kinship groups, but also in terms of how economics work. Where the majority of the banking takes place, which is sometimes not necessarily in that country, sometimes it's in Europe. Still, And so that always is sort of challenging to think about when folks think about self-determination and who's in charge and who's making money and this sort of thing.
And of course, their independence would have been in the 60s, or?
Yeah,
okay.
Depending on how you define independence.
Right. Right. Perception of.
Right. Because there's always challenges with topics like that and the way that corporate culture functions.
Now, with them being young people there in Benin, did they have any understanding of the Africatown experience and what is receiving a lot of interest and publicity here?
Yes. So their professor, we had the incredible fortune of having Dr. Yamaku, the fortune of having him at the University of South Alabama as a Fulbright scholar. Okay. See, so the study abroad is sort of a capstone experience for all these other things that have been occurring in the last 5 years. And he definitely let them know. He's one of the few curators of the bronze exhibit there in Benin, and he teaches history full-time at the university, and he had already talked to them and prepped them with his connection and experience that he had for a year here in Mobile, teaching in our history department.
This is exciting. It really is. And hearing about the interchange, very exciting indeed. We're about to take a break here so we can drop that in and come back and talk more. Our very special guest, Dr. Kern Jackson. We're talking about the students who made that trip over to Africa this past spring. And I was trying to find my title there, USA in West Africa, Dreams of Alabamians in Africa. We'll talk more about that when Perspectives continues. Our very special guest we're talking to, Dr. Kern Jackson from the University of South Alabama, and we were talking about this special trip that took place with some of your students. Give us an idea, who were some of these students? What were their interests? And some not only history majors, but some were in the medical and science arena.
Right. So my program is the African American Studies program, and it is a minor. And so all of the students have other majors like nursing, communications, biology, art. And then we had a couple of students non-traditional students on the trip, such as Mr. Robert Lewis, who was a community member who registered for the course, and he had been teaching and instructing about Africatown in Mobile County for the last 60 years.
Oh my goodness. And
so our trip was very sort of intergenerational. And we also had 3 other professors on the trip, Dr. Verana, Dr. Billingsley, and Professor Noble from Spring Hill, who helped to document our trip. But our students, they came from far and wide. We had 2 LaFleur High School graduates, a gentleman from Bessemer, and another gentleman from over in Escambia County. So we had quite a little diverse group, inaugural group. God bless them, Horatio and Eric and Kiera and Miss Hill. These were all students who are minors in African American Studies, and so this course went towards their degree completion.
Share something from one of them who talked about the significance of going back to Africa, because many of us have that desire, as you were saying, on one guy's bucket list, of returning to the motherland. Right.
No, I think that they all, from what I can, from what they shared to me when they returned, wanted to sort of continue to do work and sort of think about the role that Benin and Togo and Ghana play on the world stage and in the world economy and in their particular fields. One of our students is a criminal justice major, and he made a point to sort of explore what criminal justice looked like in particularly in WIDA.
Right.
So that's one example, and he didn't quite get a chance to go to the inside of a prison, but he did sort of get a chance to journey to the outer perimeter of one, and he was really humbled by what he witnessed. As was one of our art students, who kept getting blown away about all of this sort of interesting and intricate iconography that he was able to be exposed to in person versus in a textbook, and sort of I'm really looking forward to what he's going to do with what he learned with his material culture background.
So were your expectations met when you talk about the results of the study abroad trip for these guys?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm very grateful to Elisha and Eric and Horatio and Kiera and Miss Hill, because the initial trip is always the most challenging, right? Learning about visas, learning about inoculations, learning about, how a plane flight can jump up in price if you don't get it at a certain moment.
Right.
And I should say that we had wonderful support, not only from the university's development office, but also from the Clotilde Society, who provided a substantial amount of funds for our students to participate in this particular course.
Has what has happened the last couple of years with the Clotilde and Africa Town, has that sort of opened up new doors of opportunity for this type of exchange?
I think so. I have a colleague, Professor Petway, who had been taking students to Africa previously before this trip, and of course her efforts laid the groundwork, but also just the notion of the concrete research and the sort of exposure to not only what's going on in Africa Town, but in all parts of Mobile County. You can't throw a stone without hitting a plaque in this community, right? And sort of the preoccupation with one's ancestry and its importance to who we are today and who we're going to be going forward. And I think trips like this sort of expand the imagination for students to sort of think and be intellectuals and be critical thinkers. And that's what we have almost 14,000 students at South. And this is just one program at the University of South Alabama that attempts to provide young people with an opportunity to learn, grow, and sort of envision what they're going to be.
Now, when you talk about going to those three countries, were they able to see some of the development and modern civilization that has happened, especially when you think of Ghana being the first to achieve independence back?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the primary goals of the trip, is to sort of debunk the myths of what civilization means, indicates, and looks like, right? And one of the great things I love hearing from my students is them talking about, oh, this doesn't appear to be anything like what I've seen on TV, and I'm like, no. That is right, and there's much that you have to learn, so get to learn it, right? So so that's one of the sort of the happy things that I think is an objective.
So when you tie in the Africa Town connection, do you think that it also opens some eyes of them about that connection, since you were able to take them right there to?
Well, I think that they have a better understanding of why something like a Juneteenth ceremony in Pritchard is so important, or why economic fits and starts, say, in the county are so important. And I think they see opportunity, right? Ways of being, like, again, citizens of the globe, where they can both sort of think about how they can earn and grind, but also contribute, right? And sort of be conduits for their generation and folks to follow. So to sort of envision their future through, and that's what college is supposed to do. It's supposed to set you up, and it's not necessarily always a one-to-one correlation between this course of study and this job. It's your ability to think and write and execute and come to some conclusions and bring somebody else along with you, right? And I think that that's the beauty of what study abroad sort of does.
We got about a minute and a half left. Tell us how someone who's watching today can support the effort, because it's not free and it's not cheap.
No, we had wonderful folks. We took in funds rolling and folding. Some folks were able to give large chunks, Mr. McQueen and so forth, and then there were folks who were able to give $25. and all of the students had help from their churches. But we have two websites. One is the Clotilde Society website, where you can go and provide funds for next year's group. And also through the university, we have a donation program, givecampus.com, where you can give funds for students to supplement their ability to participate in this course.
We also have your contact information for those who may want to be a part of this, who are in the community, not in the university, because you did have that opportunity and the option. So let's show that, where they can contact you for more information about the program, as well as the plans for next year. What time of the year are you planning on going? Next spring again?
We're trying to go next May.
Okay.
And once again, we're hoping that the number of community members that want to participate and go, so we have two tracks, one for students and one for community members to participate in this opportunity. And we're hoping to sort of boost both numbers and go from 9 maybe to 2025.
And then they need to be prepared to be away for how long, roughly?
Roughly 12 days.
Okay.
That's what we're looking at. We think that that's a good number for what we try to accomplish and explore.
And you talked about inoculation.
Right. No, I mean, there's visas and there's passports and there's shots and things that one must do.
How'd that part go for everyone?
I think it went relatively smoothly once we figured out what we needed to do.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of study abroad to Africa from USA. And so again, that was part of being the inaugural group and learning the ins and outs of what's required.
Yeah, because that's something to definitely to have knowledge of.
Yes.
When you talk about going to different parts of the world, in fact. Dr. Kern Jackson, we thank you for coming and sharing. We commend you for the program you're offering, and hopefully you'll have more than 22 for your next trip.
Yeah, we look forward
spring.
to it. Thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate
you're very welcome. And thank you very much for joining us today on Perspectives. Please take advantage of the information shared, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on Perspective.